Welcome, Aki. Aki is a game industry veteran. He has been in the industry for 17 years, and he's going to tell us about his story, about his many adventures and companies, and how he's now mentoring other aspiring game developers. Please welcome, and let's begin.
Thank you. So yeah, hello, my name is Aki Kanerva. I'm from Finland, and I have been in the game industry for 18 years now. Sorry for misleading you with that title of about 17 years, because in February, my company has grown up and turned 18 years old, finally ready to let go and let the company go its own way. How they fly away so young. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about my story in the game industry for 18 years. There's 15 games, 8 cancelled partners, and 5 pivots, which is a lot of ups and downs. In this talk, I will talk about Virtual Air Guitar Company, which I co-founded. So it will be partially the story of this company, but also a personal story of me, how I have grown as a person. And together these things blend in to tell you how I learned to get some perspective on the game industry and life in general. But first, let's look at these numbers again. So that's 18 years. That's a lot of time. In that time, I have made 15 games. Mostly they have been on consoles. In that time also, 8 partners have cancelled out from under us in many various, very interesting ways. And the company has pivoted at least 5 times, depending on how you define pivot. But before that, you must be wondering, so what does a company named Virtual Air Guitar Company actually do? Well, we make motion games, which is games that utilize mostly the Xbox Kinect. There's a camera, and the camera shoots the player, and the player is transported into the game world. We've done a few of those, more than Microsoft, probably. Let's take a look at a video of a show reel that shows some of our games. Now, this first one is called Kung Fu, probably our most well-known franchise, where the player's video image is transported into a 2D side-scrolling brawler platformer. Boom Ball is our kid-friendly Xbox One game franchise, which combines Breakout and tennis, and also features 2-player multiplayer. Squid Hero is a funny random idea that we had when we just thought that, hey, we should do something with squid, because squids are awesome, so are robot crabs, right? Beatsplosion is more of a sport game where you punch crystals to the tune of very challenging music. That is me as the Beat Ninja.
Air Guitar Warrior.
Air Guitar Warrior.
Air Guitar Warrior. Prepare yourself for the ultimate epic. The game you've all been waiting for. Enjoy the awesome custom-made soundtrack and star in your own album covers.
All right, so that is what we have done over the years. Now, let's take a look at how we got into this, how we actually got started. Back in 2005, I was a student at Aalto University in Finland, and I was part of a research group into novel music interfaces and sound modeling. We were part of this European Union European project which combined a lot of universities and synthesizer manufacturer. And our part in the project was to invent various new virtual instruments in virtual reality, the virtual reality of 20 years ago, which was quite different to the virtual reality of today. We made a bunch of prototypes, ideas on how you could control music in the future, such as a virtual drum that you could actually change the size of while you were playing it, a virtual kantele, a traditional Finnish instrument, a xylophone where you could move the xylophone plates in 3D space, and of course, a virtual air guitar that worked with by wearing orange gardening gloves because it used computer vision to pick up the color orange. Let's take a look at this video that shows a very unfortunate hairstyle for myself and also some very early student projects that got everything started. Right. So this was a student project meant to be simple fun. It was intended to go into the local science museum to be an attraction, an exhibit for people to learn to play in 10 seconds and have fun with for 1 minute. And it ended up succeeding with that quite well, actually. Eventually, it would become one of the museum's most popular exhibits for several years. But let's roll back in time to 2005 when we first finished this project as students. It was a fun thing to do, but what we were not prepared for was that suddenly became quite popular in the media, because New Scientist wrote an article about us, how the crazy Finns had invented air guitar. And suddenly, within the space of like 24 hours, we were inundated with interview requests from all around the world, like the BBC, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, some random radio station in Scotland. And after we had recovered from the initial shock of people being interested in air guitar, we started thinking, well, can we utilize this media visibility somehow? There seems to be some kind of interest. This was before the age of social media. Could we utilize this somehow and bring air guitar to living rooms all around the world somehow? And well, commercialization would be very difficult, but then we realized that it was around this time that PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 had just been released or were about to be released. And for the first time, game consoles would have enough processing power to run computer vision in real time. And then our brains kind of clicked together, hey, well, there's a global distribution network for video games. Would that be the channel for creating a music game that everybody could play? This was also the time when Guitar Hero was released, and that was obviously a model because it seemed to be gathering a lot of speed. So to recap, we never actually studied game development or game design. There was no game education in Finland back in 2005. Some of us had done a little bit of software, but mostly we entered the game industry from a slightly sideways perspective. But anyway, through the help of our university incubator, Virtual Air Guitar Company was started. We founded the company in February 2006, so that's 18 years ago now. We went on to win the Venture Cup business plan competition for that year. Myself, I ended up becoming the CEO, mostly because I was good at doing PowerPoint slides. My own education was actually in interface design and content creation. The thing that I was studying before this was using artificial intelligence to create easy tools to learn music composition. But we started working on a prototype of what the virtual air guitar game would be like, and began searching for, obviously, a publisher, a funding partner, and also a co-development partner, because we knew that we were really fresh at this. We didn't know how to develop games. We would need some help to actually, from a company, from an established game studio who knew how to do these things. Let's take a look at this video of a game that was never released. So this was a prototype of the virtual air guitar game. As I mentioned, this never came out for reasons that I will go into later. But as you can see, it wasn't quite like Guitar Hero, or there was a Guitar Hero-like feature, a mode, where you could play existing rock songs. Obviously, I cannot play them back to you because we don't have the licenses for them. So, but instead, I showed you the freestyle mode, where the player gets to choose what they play. So they are actually controlling the music rather than just playing along with it. Anyway, as we move on to second year of the company, a lot of the establishment, the company establishing took place in the first year. A lot of business development, getting stuff up and running, negotiating partners, looking for publishers, all that stuff took most of a year. And in the second year, we finally started getting some traction as we toured the world, went to GDC, went to Seattle, showed our game to potential publishers and platform owners. We got in pretty nicely with Microsoft, who was developing the Xbox 360 at the time. This was before the age of Kinect. This was before anyone knew that Kinect would be released. This was back when the Xbox had the live vision camera, which was a simple webcam that you could put on top of your television. I think they had like a couple of games, one of which was Uno, the card game. Anyway, Microsoft was interested in the concept of virtual air guitar. This was around the same time that we managed to get investment from Warner Brothers Records, who was interested in having their own line of music games as a publisher. They wanted their own Guitar Hero. And things were going pretty swimmingly. We even got so far with Microsoft in the 6 to 9 months that they had assigned a lead designer for this project, some guy who had recently come off of a game called Gears of War. Things were going quite well until 2008, when Microsoft told us that, sorry, we had a really rough year at the corporate level, a rough quarter at the corporate level. We're going to drop all external projects and focus on Halo 3. Yep. So that's how virtual air guitar was cancelled for the first time. But we obviously had 12 employees by this point, and virtual air guitar still seemed like a really good idea. So we went to Sony and pitched the idea to them. They even assigned us a development partner who would handle the co-development. They were a company who had previously been making sequels for SingStar, the karaoke game. And that was going pretty well too, until Sony canceled the project. Yeah. We never found out exactly why, what the reason was. We suspect it was because somebody at Sony had heard about Microsoft's upcoming Kinect camera. You know, we'll never find out. But as a result, since that deal was cancelled as well, Warner Brothers Records decided to withdraw from the idea of having a co-publisher. Yeah, this is milestone number 1, which I will come back to later. It was quite a rough time for us, where we were already like more than 3 years into the company, and our first idea that we had worked on so very hard had just been cancelled twice. But we had another idea in our back pocket, which was Kung Fu Live, a karate game, a side-scrolling beat-em-up brawler game that would use the camera. This was, again, before Kinect existed. And, well, we had learned that technology with PlayStation 3 and that the PlayStation Eye seemed to be a better camera hardware than the Xbox Live Vision was. And that was like, yeah, sure, we'll go with this. And the other reason was that at this time of the world, you could not self-publish games on Xbox 360. You had to have a third-party publisher. But on PlayStation 3, you could self-publish on PlayStation Network. And so we started developing our backup plan, Kung Fu Live. In 7 months, we managed to finish it, which was quite a record-breaking period of time, actually. No, sorry, that was 11 months. Around the time that we were gearing up for the launch, Microsoft announced the Kinect, which resulted in the interesting thing that Kung Fu, when it was released, was called the best Kinect game on PlayStation. Okay. On the other hand, Kotaku called it enjoyably ridiculous, which is what we were going for. And it did okay. It was the number 3 seller on the PlayStation Network in December 2010. So yeah, not a resounding success. The technology was still not quite there, but it was our breakthrough. Of course, there was the matter of Kinect. It existed. It was obviously the future because it basically trivialized our 3 PhDs who had been working hard on computer vision algorithms. And now Kinect, which added a depth camera, an infrared camera next to the color camera, was advanced technology that would allow us to really do what we originally wanted. Now, for context, this is the year 2011, 6 years into the company. Mobile games are just becoming a thing. Apple has released the iPhone, and touchscreens have recently been made mainstream. Our company had 16 people working on a project. So yeah, we started developing on Xbox 360. As I mentioned before, this was not possible without third-party publishing. So we started shopping for a publisher, which, despite the fact that we had already released one game, it wasn't easy because the Kinect was still a wild card. It was quite new. But we found an Italian publisher called Blackbean Games. And together with them, we released Kung Fu High Impact. Why is the title different, you might ask? Well, that is because Microsoft did not allow any game that was already released on PlayStation 3 to be released later on the Xbox. So we had to make the same game except with a different story and different content. And we did that in 7 months. Quite a rush. And then, shortly after the release of Kung Fu High Impact, Blackbean Games went bankrupt. They also failed to get the game onto store shelves in the UK, which was the biggest market in Europe. Right. Also, Blackbean was only publishing the game in Europe, and Blackbean Games had made a separate distribution deal with North America with a different publisher, UTV Ignition. When Blackbean went bankrupt, we no longer had any communication channel with the US. So that means we didn't get our money from Blackbean Games, and we didn't get our money from the US distribution. And yeah, things were getting quite challenging, shall we say. This is milestone number 2, which I will come back to later. But we still believed. We still had some investment money left over from Warner Brothers. We still had some Finnish government support on research and development. And we went on to develop a prototype for a 3D version of Kung Fu, a sequel for that. We also developed various other ideas, including an exercise training program, a video fighter where you would record yourself doing fight moves and then use the gamepad to play as your video avatar. We developed a kids game called Happy Monster Island. All of these were ideas that we tried to pitch to publishers. But the Kinect had not been received very well by the games press, who were still the main defining factor in what games get bought before influencers became a thing. And they didn't really understand the Kinect because it was for a different target audience. It was for the Wii audience, which didn't really quite mesh in with the Xbox audience. And as a good example, back in the first year that Kinect was released, there were over 30 games released for the Kinect by other studios than Microsoft. In the second year, there were only 2, and those were sequels to dance games. So the Kinect was kind of not exactly dead, but it was a dead end for us because we couldn't find a publisher who was willing to publish a Kinect game. So through various interesting pathways, we got in touch with PrimeSense, the Israeli company who had developed the original Kinect hardware for Microsoft. And they had their own version of the Kinect called the Prime Sensor. For context, this is 2012. This is when the Indiegeddon started happening, when indie games began to get self-published. Through PrimeSense, we got in touch with Singapore Telecom, who was a telecom operator who wanted to create a set-top box for televisions that would have the Prime Sensor attached to it, and you could play motion games with it. That was a small enough project, but through that, we got in touch with some Chinese companies, including Edu, who promised to become the first official Chinese government console. Now, this was in China, where consoles used to be banned. Xbox and PlayStation were not available in that country. And Edu wanted our Kung Fu game to be the flagship product of the first official Chinese government console. Sounds pretty good, right? It did sound pretty good until Edu sold 3,000 units and went bankrupt. Yep. But no worries, we still had our contacts with PrimeSense, who were trying to find other ways of selling their camera hardware. We got in touch with Changhong, one of the largest television manufacturers in the world. They were developing a smart TV based on Android that would have a camera integrated to it. But then, well, no, Changhong didn't go bankrupt. This is different. Apple bought PrimeSense. And then they withdrew all of the PrimeSense cameras from the market globally, so you couldn't buy them anywhere. And thus, Changhong wouldn't be able to integrate those cameras into their televisions. So that project got cancelled. Now, As we approach the year 2013, our team of 16 plus a bunch of freelancers and outsourced people, the company really couldn't support them anymore. We were forced to do some layoffs because so many canceled projects. How do we deal with this? And our team of 16 dwindled down into a team of 3. This was also around the time when I had grown up from an interface designer, menu designer, into a scripter, and eventually a generalist programmer, and well, a developer that wears all the hats. Now, we had a bunch of furloughs in the summer of 2012. Our team size got shrunk down to 3. This is milestone number 3 in my story. But through another Israeli company called Omek Interactive, we got in touch with Intel, who was interested in developing short-range hand tracking for gesture control. And for them, we did not develop actual games, but we developed some quick and dirty prototypes of what close-range hand tracking could be like. What kind of games could we do? What kind of ideas could be refined later? This was actually one of our best projects financially because Intel actually paid us and didn't go bankrupt. However, Intel eventually would decide to pivot away from consumer products regarding motion control, and they would instead focus on industrial and healthcare designs. So that didn't lead to any further projects for us. Around this time, things were like, whatever, let's just check something out. We heard about Leap Motion, a Californian company developing a small camera that you would place in front of a computer keyboard so that you could do hand tracking on it. They had a little app store where people could release games and other apps for the Leap Motion. We made 2 games for them, Boomball and Boomball Adventures, which were actually based on one of the prototypes we did for Intel called Smashball. We refined that from a simple 1-level idea into a game with 50 levels and updated graphics. And for context, this was the time when PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were released. And then Leap Motion closed their app store. Hooray! Boomball was actually pretty nice. It was quoted as one of the best games on the platform. Boomball Adventures, the sequel, sold almost nothing because people had realized that the Leap Motion camera was just a gimmick and they weren't interested in further games for it. We went on to attempt to develop a mobile game based on Stunt Car Racer, the classic Commodore and Amiga game. But we also did a Leap Motion version of it where you could control the flight of the car using your hand. But those couldn't find publishing. The problem was perhaps that we were trying to develop it for Windows Phone, and we all know what happened with that. Anyway, in the year 2013-2014, the Xbox One came about, and Microsoft was like, hello, we are welcoming all indies to our platform. Everybody gets 2 free dev kits. Oh, and by the way, there's a Kinect bundled with every single console. Sounded pretty cool. So we just ordered a couple of dev kits and got down to work. Over the next 4 years, I, as lead everything, made 7 Xbox One games in 4 years. So that's on average 1 game per 6 months. It had to be this quick because our runway was always 6 months. The money from the previous project had to last until we got the next game out. So that was a lot of hard work until Microsoft announced in 2018, late 2017, that they would stop manufacturing the Kinect. We tried a few other last grasps, including a newer version of the Intel motion control called RealSense. We made an iOS version that sold 3 units and then we shut it down. We made a Nintendo Switch port of Boom Ball. Didn't quite work out. The Switch eShop was fairly hostile to indie motion games. We tried our hand at VR, a prototype that never came out. But as we arrived to the year 2019, I realized that I have been doing this for 14 years. I developed 14 games, mostly on consoles. 8 different ways of getting the rug pulled out from under us. This forced me to do a re-evaluation. Do I really want to keep doing this forever? I realized that I'm burned out. I can't keep doing this anymore. And fortunately, around this time, we had moved office from a very quiet side nook in a nearby city to downtown Helsinki, where I was able to meet other game developers, punch my head through up the surface of the water, look around me. Hey, there's actually people. Should I be interacting with these folks? I've been working so hard. Maybe I should actually, talk with someone. And I realized that even though none of our games had been super successful and the company hadn't been able to support a bigger team, I had actually collected a lot of experience. Maybe that's worth something. This idea hadn't even occurred to me prior to this. But I got involved with mentoring. And I started telling my story to other people and realized that, hey, yeah, people are actually finding this stuff useful. I got involved with the local IGDA and the global IGDA mentorship program, with Living Game Intelligence Network, an incubator for game startups, and a bunch of other things. And this was like a real galaxy brain moment to me. I realized that I was actually kind of good at this, which was frankly quite surprising because I had considered myself to be nothing but a mediocre programmer up until now. Let's continue with this thread and look back at the milestones of growth that I had over the course of my career. There was a time when the virtual air guitar game was cancelled. We were very blue-eyed back then. There was the time when Black Bean Games went bankrupt and didn't pay us. There was the long and arduous process of trying to find publishers and not finding any, reducing the team size, taking on more and more responsibility. And then there was a time of crunching out 2 games per year. Those were pretty big defining factors when I look back. But what did I learn about them? All the usual wise stuff. All of these things. These are not like, I'm not saying anything new here. I'm just telling you how I found out, how I came across the old adage is, landscape keeps changing under you. No matter what you do, even the best laid plans will have to change. That means that if you start something today with an idea of what you might be doing in 5 years, you probably won't be doing that in 5 years. But it doesn't matter because you can always adapt to doing something different. I learned also that success is a matter of definition. So none of our games ended up selling tens of millions. But there's other ways to measure success. For me, success means seeing a 5-year-old kid jumping from sheer joy in front of a camera playing our game. That was a pretty good feeling, to be honest. And finally, our past makes us who we are. I have been involved with a lot of projects. Some of them failed. Some of them kind of succeeded. But if I hadn't gone through all those hoops that were on fire, I wouldn't be the person who I am today. I wouldn't have the breadth of knowledge that I now have as a mentor. So would I choose to do it again? That's an irrelevant question. It has happened. I cannot change the past. What I can do is rewrite the past so that I can pick out the good things from it. I also learned quite a few things about myself as a person. I learned that I'm surprisingly good at explaining and teaching and understanding other viewpoints. I learned that sharing is very rewarding for me, and that is why I am enjoying myself very much right now when I'm able to give this presentation to everybody who's listening. I also much later realized that I had already undergone a mental shift from being a developer to being a leader. So today, Virtual Air Guitar Company kind of still exists. The previous games are still available. They're not selling a lot, but there is no activity at the moment. There are no other employees than myself, and I'm not really doing anything with that. I've been taking a break as a mentor for the past 4 years or so, trying to recover from my burnout, wondering if I'll ever be able to have a job again. And fortunately, very recently, this tale has a happy, maybe not ending, but a continuation. Because just last month, I started in a new job as CTO at Scion Games. So, did I plan this when I founded the company back in 2006? I most certainly did not. I couldn't have foreseen most of what happened here. But I survived. Still here. That's one definition of success, most certainly. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation and give you my LinkedIn information. If you wish to connect with me, please send a message that you saw this talk at Games Gathering Lviv. And that's it. Happy to hear your questions.
Thank you very much, Aki, for your lecture. Dear guests, please, you can ask your questions in the chat on Pine. And we're going to start with the first question. The question is, what's the most useful experience you have learned that is helping you now from all of your career?
That's an excellent question because there are so many. It's hard to pick just one. I'm going to say that the experience that has affected me the most and helped me learn the most was actually burning out. This is a hot take, I know, but bear with me here. Because if I hadn't gone down into the deepest pit, I wouldn't have learned how to be more aware of myself, to be able to avoid it in the future. I don't recommend anyone doing that on purpose, but that's kind of, that's possibly the most important path that I took.
Thank you. Let's wait for a few more questions. Right. One more question is, can you please tell something about how the Finnish game industry is outside of work? Do you have like meetups? Do you have people you can you showcase your prototypes to, and just maybe fun stories?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good topic. Finnish game industry is fairly old. It started already back in the 90s, but back then it was just a handful of companies. But over time, it has grown up to be one of the most active communities. it's probably the most active IGDA chapter in the world, and it's a very vibrant community where people help each other out quite a lot. There are monthly IGDA meetups, as well as other conferences and meetups and just bar nights where developers of all kinds can get together. We have several IGDA hubs. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them. Helsinki is, of course, the biggest because a big part of the game industry is focused there. But the other hubs elsewhere in the major cities are also very active. And they have like very tight hubs that involve schools, game developers, the city, and kind of work together to get students into incubators and then to launch game companies. We have several different conferences. All of them are free to attend. Most of them are free to attend. And we also have, in addition to the IGDA, there are other non-profit organizations such as We in Games Finland and We Love Games. And there are also some game incubators that offer help and mentorship to young game startups. I personally am involved with 3 different mentorship networks where I usually take on 1 or 2 mentees per quarter and meet up with them like every couple of weeks for the course of 3 months. Topics can range from like how to get a career started in games, how to deal with specific like development topics like programming, or help with starting up your indie company.
All right. I think that's it. We have no more questions. So thank you very much, Aki, for your lecture and your answers. I hope to see you
It was a
again.
pleasure to be here.
Have a good day.
Likewise. Bye, everyone.